The word dopamine is almost always followed by detox. In the modern world, it's linked more to actions that do us harm than those that do us good. But dopamine is something to be sought after. It can take you from good to great, consistently. I've described myself as a longevity enthusiast on this channel, and I want to focus on concepts that are more than just diet and exercise. I want to explore some neurological longevity benefits as well, and I want to start that with dopamine. Dopamine is often demonized due to the crashes that people will experience when they abuse pornography, alcohol, drugs, and dopamine actually plays a much more crucial role in reinforcing positive behavior, but the thing is, it's so much harder to detect and notice these positive and sustainable dopamine levels that it often gets overlooked. So what I'm going to do in this video is give you an overview of what dopamine is, why we'd actually want to create it, and how we can maintain those sustainable levels. Dopamine is a type of neurotransmitter, which is a type of chemical messenger within the brain, and it performs two main functions. The first one being moving, which we think of as current behavior, and the second one being learning, which we can think of as future behavior. Now, the way you've probably heard dopamine described is in relation to our reward system. Dopamine is released when we achieve or experience something enjoyable so that that behavior is reinforced and we are encouraged to pursue it next time. Dopamine levels naturally fluctuate throughout the day, and they play a key role in our circadian rhythm and our sleep-wake cycle. So in the morning, we experience higher levels of dopamine to promote wakefulness and alertness, but then as time goes on, we will taper off throughout the day and other neurotransmitters will take over, such as melatonin, to encourage sleep. One of these neurotransmitters is melatonin, and so during the night, dopamine levels will remain relatively low so that melatonin can take over and promote sleep. Dopamine and melatonin have an inverse relationship and both work side by side to modulate the production of sleep-promoting and wake-promoting neurons. So what this means is that disruptions to your circadian rhythm and sleep-wake cycle can cause imbalances in healthy dopamine levels. Some, such as jet lag, are uncontrollable and you just have to weather through it, but some, such as irregular sleeping patterns, these can be remedied with a bit of targeted effort. So when we come to the question of why we actually want to produce dopamine, it's often referred to as the motivation molecule that will keep you focused and on track to achieving your goals. Dopamine is the fuel that will keep you going down the road even when there are many different bumps. With the right balance of dopamine, you're also much more likely to engage in tasks that require sustained effort. In a world where it's so easy to get distracted by so many different things, dopamine is that sort of cheat code that can help you remain on course. Lately, I've been hearing and reading about the importance of deep work. Now, Cal Newport has a fantastic book on this. So fucking stupid. Fuck, we're so close. In order to engage in meaningful deep work, I truly believe you have to have motivation in your corner. There is one tweak I'd make to the definition though. I don't like to think of dopamine as a motivation molecule because you can become motivated in the short term and then as soon as it becomes difficult, you lose all interest and all drive. I like to think about dopamine as a discipline molecule because of the encouragement of sustained effort to see the thing through to the end. When we think back to the evolutionary origins of dopamine, it was a molecule that was released to encourage behaviors that aided in our survival and the ability to reproduce. So when humans ate food, dopamine was released to encourage that they seek out these food sources in the future. Likewise, when it came to social interactions and reproduction, dopamine was released again because this meant the survival of our race. Dopamine acted as a guide to keep us alive in the absence of external cues that could do that for us, for example, books and YouTube videos. There is another view of dopamine that I think is worth exploring, and this comes from a paper published by Josh Berke, where he views dopamine as a modulator of resource allocation. Specifically, dopamine provides a reason of how worthwhile it is to expend a limited resource between different striatal subregions of the body. For example, the finite resource for controlling movement is energy. If someone's running a marathon, high levels of dopamine mean that the body can then justify sending more energy to the legs to get that marathon completed faster. And then for cognitive functions, the finite resources are attention and working memory, and actually marshalling these resources does require effort. If you have low levels of dopamine, you find it easy to become distracted and not focus on the task at hand. But the higher sustained level of dopamine, the easier we find it to control these impulses and remain focused on the task at hand until it's complete. Therefore, the contribution of dopamine to ongoing behavior is both economic in terms of resource allocation and also motivational, i.e., is it worth expending these resources? Let's dig a little deeper into how dopamine influences movement. Dopamine is produced in a part of the brain called the substantia nigra. Now, this is in the basal ganglia, and the basal ganglia is a group of structures that will control voluntary movements. When dopamine is released, it helps to transmit signals to other parts of the basal ganglia to facilitate slow and controlled movements. As a matter of fact, Parkinson's is closely linked to low levels of dopamine. In individuals with Parkinson's, the neurons that produce dopamine within the brain degenerate and die, And this sharp decrease in dopamine leads to symptoms such as tremors, rigidity, and also postural instability. Now, this really shows how important dopamine is as a modulator, ensuring that movements are controlled and fluid and not too rigid, but not too erratic. Now, finally, when it comes to learning new movements, and this can include anything from riding a bike to learning a new musical instrument, the brain will release dopamine after successful reps to encourage the formation of these correct motor pathways, and this is going to be crucial in developing the mastery of that skill. Alongside this natural cycle of dopamine production, there are a number of natural and unnatural ways to cause our dopamine levels to fluctuate. These natural ways cause a slow and sustained increase that will bring many benefits for us and the tasks that we perform, whereas these unnatural ways cause a sudden surge followed by an immediate crash. We're going to focus on these natural ways first. So let's start at the beginning of the day. When you wake up, you've got a choice. You can either get out of bed and do something that requires effort, such as brush your teeth, take a cold shower, or you can turn over, look at your phone, and look at the notifications, engage in social media, which will cause an immediate spike followed by that crash. Cold exposure has gained a lot of attention in recent years, and anyone that knows me knows I'm a huge advocate for cold showers early in the morning. But the opinion in the fitness community is split, and that depends on what you're trying to achieve, whether you're going for muscle hypertrophy or whether you're going for mental clarity. When you expose yourself to cold water, the body will initiate a series of adaptive responses to maintain homeostasis and protect our vital organs, kind of like survival mode. And one of these responses is to activate our sympathetic nervous system, which will promote the release of hormones such as dopamine and norepinephrine. The norepinephrine is actually produced first, and then this will trigger the release of dopamine. And this surge of dopamine is what will contribute to feelings of focus, alertness, and even euphoria. There's a really great article I found that goes into maximizing the benefits of cold showers, and if I find out how to edit and put the link here, I will, but if not, I will leave it in the description. The other ways to naturally increase dopamine fall in line with the building blocks of a healthy lifestyle, and this include exercise, consistent sleep, sunlight exposure, meditation, you name it. When it comes to diet, there are actually foods high in tyrosine that will produce dopamine, and these foods include chicken, avocados, bananas, and almonds. The other side to maintaining healthy dopamine levels is social interaction and also engaging in hobbies and activities. Now, the unnatural ways are those that will kind of hijack your dopamine production system, and this will produce such a unnatural spike in dopamine that your brain gets so alarmed it just crashes out. A few other things that contribute to this are porn usage, social media, sugary foods, and drug usage, but I'm going to cover all of that and dopamine detox in another video. Somehow with all my videos, I end up circling back to caffeine as the benefits seem to be never-ending if used responsibly. Caffeine stimulates the central nervous system, which in turn will stimulate the release of dopamine. This causality explains why you feel so alert and awake after your first cup of coffee. Aside from this direct effect, caffeine also blocks the adenosine receptors within the brain. Adenosine is a neurotransmitter that promotes sleep and relaxation, and then by blocking these receptors, caffeine will put off that feeling of drowsiness. This leads to a further indirect enhancement in the effectiveness of dopamine by allowing for a greater dopamine response. It's worth clarifying that this is a short-term effect. This boost in dopamine can help with immediate energy and focus, but this does taper over time. Also, you can build up a tolerance to caffeine, which is definitely something to watch out for. The potential downside to excess caffeine relates to excessive consumption, and this is where you build up such a tolerance that your body's used to performing with dopamine levels up here, that it struggles to function without it. And so this is where withdrawal symptoms come into play, such as headaches and irritability, which is why it's so important to control and modulate your caffeine intake. All of this is to say that dopamine shouldn't be avoided, it should be controlled. Now in my next video, I'm going to go into what this lack of control can cause and dive deeper into detoxes. But for now, I really hope you've taken as much from listening to this as I have from researching it. Catch you next time.